or imagining that you're in captivity, you're being tortured 24/7, and this ongoing thing, and that it's better off being dead than being in captivity.
I imagine the closer you are to that day you were taken, the harder it is, because you're the contrast of the life you had and now that you have. Meaning, I would think, putting on a psychologist hat for a second, that the longer they go into captivity, the easier it becomes to be in captivity.
Well, yes, but that's the adjustment stage.
Right.
But the first initial shock, just like they encountered in the camps, like this, oh my God, this overwhelming contrast between their normal lives and the horrors. But it's not just that; it's also literally the horrors that they endured on the 7th of October. That was, the murdering and raping and the slaughtering and the injuries that either they sustained themselves. That was all going on the 7th of October. And in captivity, you somehow adjust to the situation. And coming out it's difficult to adjust.
So anybody who's never been in it, which is probably all of our listeners, they can't imagine being able to adjust to such a thing. I don't mean it in jest, but like we have problem with a 3-day yontif.
Right.
There are people, I'm serious, like how can you imagine adjusting the smallest life pressures throw people off kilt? Right. And you're telling me that these people adjusted to eating 3 pieces of rice and a tiny little pita a day for 500 days. They adjusted to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Is that the human psyche? Is that what we all have? Like, really? We have the ability to do that?
Definitely, for sure. And when we go into survival mode, and we're capable of adjusting to anything. And I think all those people have trouble with 3-day yontif and all that. They need to. It's another thing that we can learn from these survivors to say, wow, let's remember, what they went through, and how could I be complaining about a 3-day yontif? By the way, I have many patients of mine who, before the 7th of October, were suffering from PTSD, and there's a phenomenon of after the 7th of October. They feel much better because they're like, how could I complain, when I see what other people went through? And so that actually helps us to have, perspective on things. But another thing I wanted to mention about the Holocaust that's important that we're learning from here is that the spirit of Viktor Frankl and all of the Holocaust survivors, I feel like it's been revived in a positive way. And I think that's wonderful because many people have already, forgotten about the Holocaust and it's a thing of the past. But what I saw here is that Viktor Frankl and other survivors, their spirit and their legacy is being passed on. And specifically, I have to mention Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who he had read Viktor Frankl, and he remembered that Frankl borrowed from Nietzsche the idea of if you have a why, then you can bear any how. And that's what helped Hirsch survive through the different stages and different parts of the captivity until tragically he was.
Is that what you
killed.
Heard from other hostages that were with him?
And that's the point. And I feel like I have this mission to pass on that message, because Hirsch tragically didn't survive, but Hirsch's spirit did survive. And he passed on that idea to other hostages he met. He said, you got to have your why.
Did you really? This is the first time I'm hearing that. I've interviewed his mother a few times. This is the first time I'm hearing this.
This is a big thing, and I feel like really passionate about it because I feel like I have to pay this tribute to Hirsch and to all the other survivors who didn't, they're not with us anymore, but their spirit is. Because I met the hostages who had met Hirsch in captivity, and they said, I asked them, what helped you cope? And they said, I had my why. I said, where'd you get that from? And they said, from Hirsch, who got it from Viktor Frankl. And so Hirsch gave them this coping tool, and they survived thanks to Hirsch. So I think that's amazing.
Wow. The other end of it, meaning these terrorists, through talking to these hostages, do you get a purview into the mental state of what a Hamas terrorist has going on inside their head? And could you explain that?
Yeah. Well, that's tricky, and it's something that people need to wrap their heads around. The whole concept of captivity to understand it's much more complex than we imagine. Again, I go back to the initial preconceived notion, better off being dead than being in captivity, and assuming that it's 24/7, torture, and in the dungeons. There's, don't get me wrong,
it's not ideal. It's not good.
Captivity is hell, and every single hostage went through some type of abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, psychological. But there's also other aspects, and there was quite a bit of like interpersonal interaction between the
terrorists,
captives and the captors, and so it's hard for people to understand that, but that was a really important part of what helped the captives, the hostages, actually survive. And some people have heard the term Stockholm syndrome, and I refuse to call it Stockholm syndrome because that has a pathological connotation. I would call it captivity bonding reaction. That's a term that I came up with, and I'm trying to push that for us to realize that it's not pathological, but it's actually a healthy survival mechanism for a hostage to actually find the way to bond with his or her captor will actually improve your conditions and allow you to cope better. And there are dozens and dozens of examples of hostages who manage to have some kind of a relationship with their captor and get on their good side and improve their conditions. And so it also leads us into the head of the captor, because it just shows that even though they're, the Hamas, they're not good people, we call them monsters, but it's important to realize that they're people, they're a human being from the point of view that if there's a human being there, then you can influence them. And that's what I do also when I teach our commandos in POW training. I reframe captivity, and I call it, captivity is an interpersonal traumatic situation. But it's, traumatic, everyone understands, but interpersonal, how does that make sense? But no, there is another person there. And if you realize that, then you can influence them. And so sometimes those captors also developed positive feelings towards towards the hostages, and they gave them preferential treatment. And so there's a lot going on there it's hard for us to wrap our arms around.
It's hard to talk about because, I think everyone right now is like, don't you dare say anything nice about it. And we're not, we're not saying anything good about them. They are animals. But, I interviewed a hostage, and he did tell me that like there was his captor in the room with him for hundreds of days, and they were talking. They were having conversations, and it's hard to understand. It's like really, it's hard to understand the humanity, but they are human beings. It's crazy. They are human, and this is something that maybe had glimmers of the humanity throughout
completely.
That
and it's really important to realize that whatever a hostage did there, it's all about survival, and God forbid that we be critical or judgmental. And we have to see it as it's good that they managed to apply these.
Did you find any of the hostages that came out showcased any of like, man, they not miss him, but I just spent 700 days with that guy, and